letter from Paul to Philemon is artful. It is amazing. It's a wonderful piece of literature. And parents everywhere, this is how guilt can be a good thing. This is how it can work when you really mean it to bring attention to the finer details of a situation. Okay? So first off, a little bit of cultural background about this letter. First off, we know and have great confidence that this letter is one that is quite likely written by Paul. Don't want to disillusion you, but a lot of things attributed to Paul are not necessarily Paul. Which is why if you read all of Paul together, you say, well, why did he say that there and that there? He's contradicting himself. Different authors. So this one, though, we really do ascribe to Paul. And again, it's masterful. He really understands the position that he's in terms of the authority he has and can choose to use, but is choosing to use very wisely. What's happening here in this letter is addressed to this guy, Philemon. Philemon is in Colossae. In Colossae, he has responsibility for the Christian community there that meets in his house. Now remember, in that first century, it's not like when Paul went and created a Christian community that they all got their hammers out and built a house, a church to meet in. In fact, it would have been exactly the opposite. Because in those years, the Roman Empire, where Colossae is located, the Roman Empire thought it an act of sedition or a crime against the state if Roman citizens did not worship the pantheon of gods and goddesses that the emperor identified for them to worship, including the emperor's own self as a deity. So to not worship those gods could get you killed. So you're not going to go out and build a church for yourself. You're going to meet carefully and secretly in other people's houses. Now apparently Philemon was wealthy enough that he had a significantly large enough house for people to be meeting in. He would have had a great hall for entertaining. And only people of status who would have on a regular basis kept up the economic and social relationships expected of people of status that made the empire run. He would have had a hall big enough for that. And enough power for other magistrates perhaps look the other way if they got wind of the fact that he might have converted his entire household to Christianity. So he could afford, quite literally, could afford to do it. Now, it's interesting how this letter is addressed, isn't it? It starts out where he says, okay, I am addressing Philemon, our dear friend and co-worker, and Apphia, our sister, and Archippus, our fellow soldier. All of those people would have been living as family in that home to Philemon. That's his family. Perhaps even Apphia is his wife. But he was responsible as the Roman citizen and a household leader for all the people in his home. And then he says, why do we think that was a family? Because then Paul says, and also I greet the church in your house. So that's part of really kind of outlining for us what's going on there. His family lives there, and they host this Christian community. Now, some of the things to remember for us socially and culturally are, again, in the Roman Empire, of which Philemon was a citizen. And you could only be a citizen if you were male. No one else was a citizen unless they met the qualifications of being male and free. Okay? And he meets those qualifications, and he owns everybody and everything in his household. He owns his wife. She has a title of property. Even if she's nobility, she has a title of property. And it's this exchange between men about the engagement of daughters who become wives. That is an economic contract between men and has nothing to do with romantic love. Okay, so next time you hear somebody say, And here, he's responsible for everyone's household, including the slaves, of which apparently we have our good friend Onesimus as one of them. Onesimus as a slave in Philemon's household was his property, to do with what he willed, even to kill. Apparently, Onesimus did something in the household that was either really wrong or would have brought Philemon's household shame, which would have been really bad social currency. Enough of that, we speculate he was either exiled or ran away. More likely he ran away, because his life is then really in jeopardy if Philemon decided that he was going to have him killed. So who does he go to, perhaps? Safe harbor, as far away as possible to where Paul is, and finds Paul in prison. But here's what happens. We think that Paul, in his imprisonment, was probably, kind of speculate, like, where was he? Was he in Rome before his imprisonment? Was he in, Ephesus? I'm more of the opinion that he was at Caesarea Maritima. It's not too far from Jerusalem, and was right on the ocean and a favorite place for the governors of Judea to hang out, the Roman governors, summer baths. So there he would have perhaps been imprisoned, and it's easy for a person like Onesimus to serve Paul. Paul is a Roman citizen. He has certain rights because of that, including the right to have contact with the outside world and even have a slave. Even have someone serve on him and not be happy to be in prison, but go back and forth with his connection. So if Onesimus is filling that role, then he is very vital to Paul in being able to have any understanding of what's going on in that world outside of him and Timothy, who are in prison. And it's really interesting how this plays out, because I get the feeling that Paul is aware of what he's going to do when he comes to trial. He's absolutely going to say things that will get him killed. He knows that. And he doesn't want to risk this relationship with Onesimus, I think. So he wants to send him back to safety. But is it safe to go back there when his master Philemon has every right to kill him for having run away? So this is a very carefully crafted letter, and it appeals to the teachings that Paul himself has imparted to Philemon and that house church. So he starts out, he kind of says, for this reason, though I'm bold enough to command you by my authority, I'm not going to. I'm not going to ask you to be obedient. I'm going to ask you to do it because of love. And I'm going to ask you not to receive him back as a slave, but rather as your brother. I'm going to ask you to accept him as a relative, an equal and free in your household. And furthermore, I see him, says Paul, as my child. So he's kind of like your nephew, which is a huge emotional relationship between guys at that time. So I'm trusting you with my own king. Treat him as you would me. And I love this little last end where he kind of sticks it to him. He says, I'm asking you to charge anything that he's done wrong or any cost he's been to you, perhaps even code for I will buy his freedom. Whatever debt he still owes, I will pay for it. Charge it to me. And yet I mention nothing, says Paul, of the benefit you have from me that I never charged you for, which was essentially saving your soul. Isn't that great? Never mind now. It's wonderful. Now, this idea is going to be so challenging with Philemon because of this primary idea that the society around him has raised him to believe as a privileged person, which is to say that he owns stuff, including people, that he owns everything around him in his little kingdom. Now, in our gospel reading, we have this wonderful list of stuff that Jesus challenges his followers to think of as possessions. We get it that we have cars and clothes, things like that. But he's really appealing. When he turns around and he's talking to this crowd, look at this order of things. He turns around and says, whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even, yes, life itself, Look at that list of things you're supposed to hate. But first of all, here's a different translation for you. Rather than hate, the word is probably better translated in this context as dispossess. Dispossess. Whoever comes to me and does not dispossess their father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even life itself. Quite literally, don't own it. Don't even think it's yours. Do not even attempt to possess it. Don't possess your father and mother. Don't possess your wife and children. Who's he talking to? Who's the only one that can possess anything in that culture? Who's not listed? Husband. It's the titled, privileged men in that culture and society. In our time, it's different. In our country, it's different. In other countries, it's not. In ours, we have different ways that we still kind of walk around the burden of this notion of what we possess and what we own. And here's this thing. You don't own anyone. And you don't own anything that you happen to have around you. And you don't even own or possess your own life. God gave it to you. God made it. God sees it. It's God's. It's God's. It's God's. You are God's possession, and you own nothing. Wow. That's a huge lesson. And I'm not sure we get that. And I'm pretty sure Paul is trying for Philemon to get that in a big way. And it's hugely challenging. We get so many messages from our culture about what we're supposed to think about other people, whether they're other minorities, whether they're other genders than us, on and on and on. We get scripted in society and through media about how we're supposed to relate to one another. And my gosh, consumerism, all the stuff we're supposed to possess, that is going to make us better. No way. All of that takes us away, says Paul, from the root and foundational understanding that our identity is possessed and anchored in God. Now, a couple of weeks ago, on Tuesday, August 20th, a young African-American woman named Antoinette Tuff, who works as a bookkeeper in the front office of a school in Decatur, Georgia. It's a school located predominantly in an African-American community. And to keep their children secure from all the things that can happen to our kids these days at school, they have a buzz-in lock. And it just so happened that day Antoinette was manning that front office and security system, and a parent was buzzed through. But right behind that parent was a guy named Mike Hill, a 20-year-old white young man who came in with an AK-47 and 500 rounds of ammunition. Now, this just happened a couple weeks ago in Decatur, Georgia. Mike came through and into that secure alcove where Antoinette was seated. And she immediately knew they'd been practicing and drilling on how to respond. So she started talking to him right away, very respectfully. And initially she called him Sir. Sir, what do you need? What can I do for you? And she tried to keep him from going down the hallway into the school. But what he did instead is he asked her to call 911 and talk through that operator to the police. He wanted certain things, or he would hurt the children. Almost 900 children were in that school at that time. And as he went outside the first time, as officers started to arrive, he started to shoot at them and said to her, I came here today to kill people and to die. My life isn't worth anything. And I came here today for police to kill me. And as he shot at people, he would come back in and seem horrified by what he'd done. And she said, what can I do for you? What else do you need them to do? And she would tell the operator, have the police back off, and he'll stop shooting. Have them back off. And then he said and confessed, I shouldn't be here today. I have mental illness, and I'm not taking my medication, he told her. And I should have gone to the hospital instead of doing this. And then he said, all of a sudden, she had just that Sunday at church learned about a sermon that said, to encourage her to be anchored in God. And so even in the midst of her terror, she was trying to be anchored in God. And because of that, she was anchored in the compassion of God, of her faith. And in that moment when he said, I shouldn't be here, I'm ill, she said, oh, honey, oh, dear, we all have stuff in life. I was married for 33 years, and my husband left me. And he left me with a child with multiple disabilities. And I attempted suicide. We all have stuff, honey, that we regret. But we can all change. Look at me, she said. I'm working. I have a job, and my life is getting better. And he said, but they're going to kill me. They're going to hate me. I shot at them. I shot at police. And she said, you didn't hurt anybody, honey. There's no one out there that you hit. It's okay. And so through that 911 operator, over the next hour, she talked to him, talked to the police, got them to de-escalate. Eventually, he was handing her his guns, and they put them away. And he wanted his bottle of water with him, and so she told police the only thing he has is a cell phone and a bottle of water now. And he was down on the floor with his hands behind his back. And she said to him, dear, I'm not going to buzz them in until you're ready. You tell me when you're ready for them. Because, honey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay right here with you. You're not alone, and I just want you to know that I love you, okay? And she buzzed in the police, and they arrested him, and now he's in jail, and they're trying to figure out what's the next best thing to happen for him. I hope a hospital where he needs to be. Now, we have so many messages in our society right now, different from the first century in Jerusalem, thank heaven, but still we have messages about how we're supposed to treat one another. This young white male, 20 years old, an African-American female. When you contrast that to the Trayvon Martin incident, when you contrast this whole thing even against the backdrop of Sandy Hook and Columbine, when you think about the messages we've received then as a society, that the only way that we should respond to violence is by arming ourselves for further violence, this woman was armed with nothing except her faith and her heart, willing to love and take a man desperate in despair and bring him to a place of hope, and take a society that actually encourages us in so many ways to hate and fear, even in the midst of our own fear, taking him from hate to love. And the only way to do that is as Christ has asked us to do. Don't own any of that. Just know you are anchored in God. And by God, we can love infinitely well. In Christ's name.